You're listening to Points Everywhere, the podcast where busy people learn to take amazing trips for minimal out-of-pocket cost without having to devote a ton of time to the process. I'm your host, Courtney. I'm a mom, traveler, and primary care physician. I'll share the secret strategies my family uses to earn points and miles so that you and your family can travel everywhere for almost free, just like us. Welcome to Points Everywhere. Today is part 2 of my Destination Inspiration episode on Santorini. If you didn't listen in last time, go ahead and jump back to episode 16. I'll talk about the amazing deal that we got on our hotel in Santorini that really prompted this whole trip, and all of the awesome things that we did in Santorini. Today's episode will focus on travel to and from Santorini, including our amazing business class flight on Emirates. We'll also talk about transportation within Santorini. I had heard a lot about Emirates business class and really wanted the opportunity to fly. And so I pretty much just narrowed my search immediately to looking for Emirates business class, Newark to Athens. For this specific trip, I really wasn't looking at other routes or options, though there definitely are other options and ways to get there. I was lucky that I booked this before Emirates changed some of their prices, and there was still the ability to transfer one-to-one from multiple different transferable points currencies, including Amex. So my business class flights were booked from transferring Amex points one-to-one to Emirates, which is now no longer an option. The ratio is not quite one-to-one. But you can still transfer one-to-one to Emirates from Bilt. So that is a good option if you're looking to book Emirates flights. Our business class flights were booked through Emirates directly after transferring Amex points there. They were 87,000 points per ticket and a total of $867 in taxes and fees for the two of us combined. So 174,000 points and $867 for the two tickets. This is a trip that was worth over $6,700 in value, so worked out to about 3.4 cents per point, a decent redemption. Honestly, though, this experience was amazing, and I would have booked this even if the redemption wasn't as good. An even better way to book this that I really wasn't aware of at the time is booking Emirates through JAL, Japan Airlines. You can get JAL miles from Bilt or Rove transfers. And with this, you can actually book the exact same flight that we took for 60,000 points through JAL and about only $100 in taxes and fees. So this would be a much less expensive way to get from Newark to Athens on the exact same flight, Emirates business class. You can also book Emirates flights through Air Canada and Qantas. So those are other ways to look at booking through partners that actually might be better now that the transfer ratios transferring one-to-one to Emirates directly are not as common, and because Emirates has raised their taxes and fees, so they are a bit high. I will say, though, that this flight was still a great value in my opinion. People whine a lot about the taxes and fees for Emirates, but at the end of the day, I paid less than $1,000 for the two of us to get there. We were flying on an amazing business class product, and it was less than I would have paid just for 2 economy flights there in many cases. So for me, yes, I had to pay some cash to get there, but it was totally worth it. Overall, the experience on Emirates business class was incredible. I am not someone that has flown business class ever before, so I do not have anything to compare to. But I do know that we had an amazing experience and it felt absolutely worth the points price and the taxes and fees paid. This entire experience was so funny because as we're getting on the flight, there's all these people getting in business class and they're just, acting normally as if they're getting on a regular plane ride. Just sort of boring, mundane, as if you would be if you're getting on a regular economy Southwest flight. And I was so excited about everything, every single aspect of this flight. Immediately we're boarding the flight. The flight attendants have these gorgeous outfits on. The plane just looks very luxurious in general. And I'm immediately so excited. We get to our seats. They're just these huge plush looking seats with a little mini bar area attached where there's bottled beverages, all different snacks just sitting right there, huge entertainment screens, just looking so luxurious right up front. And as we're getting into our seats, I'm just so excited. I was not playing it cool at all. I'm pointing at everything and like, ooh, look at this, look at that, touching everything, excited, taking videos. And everyone around us is just kind of like, oh, I'm getting on a plane. This is no big deal. Honestly, I don't know. Business class is so cool. I can't imagine myself feeling just mundane and not excited about that. But I don't know. Maybe if I do it enough, eventually it will feel that way. But I had absolutely no chill, and that's fine. It was great. Immediately when you board, you're offered champagne, and it's good champagne, not like the kind of champagne you would get on a domestic first class flight. And then there's this menu of all different drink options, basically like a full cocktail bar, multiple wine selections, multiple champagne selections. We also had basically a full menu of different hors d'oeuvre type things we could order. I got a cheese platter, which was incredible. And this felt like high-end restaurant food. It was all so delicious. And there were tons of options. Our flight took off at midnight, and so we weren't really hungry at all, but we wanted to try everything. So did get a few things and enjoy the food. I spent a bunch of time checking out all of the fun amenities that we got, and it was this really nice little zip-up pouch stuffed with products. There was a toothbrush and toothpaste, deodorant, different lotions, perfume, hair tie, earplugs, all kinds of fun little products, and then there was a men's version of the same. We also got a set of pajamas, which were pretty nice. I didn't wind up putting them on for the flight, but I've worn them quite a bit after that. Loungewear in this really nice jersey material that was given to everybody. We also got our own slippers, face masks. I just couldn't believe all the things that were included on this. It was really so cool. I was very torn between wanting to get some good sleep and wanting to be awake to enjoy the experience. And so we were up for a couple of hours having drinks, some food, watching some cooking shows on our huge screens, exploring the entertainment system. But eventually, we did really want to make sure we got good sleep. And so then the flight attendants came by and helped us set up the beds. The super plush, very comfortable seat reclines fully so that it's completely flat. And then when it reclines, it sort of fills in the space between the end of the seat and then the footwell. So you have just a continuous bed, basically. And then the flight attendants put a mattress pad over the whole thing. So you're not like right on the leather seat surface. You're on like a soft fabric. And then they give you blanket, pillow, and you really can snuggle up and sleep. And I did sleep pretty well. It was amazing. There wasn't a ton of hours to sleep, but I was glad that being to Greece versus shorter European trips like Iceland and Ireland, which we've done recently, on those, there's not really enough hours to sleep from the East Coast, or not to sleep a good amount of time, but got a decent amount of sleep. And then breakfast time, I wasn't that hungry, but again, wanted to enjoy the experience. So I did order breakfast. I got a really good omelet, a croissant, some fresh fruit, all delicious, and some coffee. Then we landed in Athens. Overall, the Emirates business class experience was incredible. I would love to experience first class, which is on a whole separate floor of the plane and includes a bar that you can walk up to. It all sounds like the business class experience, but even more luxurious, which is honestly a little bit hard for me to imagine. But that's something that I would love to try at some point. Service was incredible. All the amenities were incredible. I really have no complaints about the business class experience. Totally worth the price. Amazing. Once we landed, I had this feeling, wow, this was so awesome that if our vacation was ending here right now, I would be okay with that. Of course, I was very excited to explore Santorini and wanted to do more, but it really felt worth the trip, even if we had to just turn around and fly back. That's how great it was. I'll back up a little bit and talk about how we got to Newark in the first place and sort of the logistics of booking a flight from a location that isn't your home airport. In points and miles, this general concept is called repositioning. If you're looking for an awesome points deal, if you're searching from your home airport to where you want to go, you're not necessarily going to find what you want. If I was searching my little home airport over to Santorini, for example, I would come up empty or would come up with not the same product. Really, the Emirates business class goes from Newark to Athens. And so when you find an incredible points deal or a great route that you want to take, you can book that and then separately reposition, meaning find your own way to get to the part where your points flight originates from. What we did in this case is I booked Newark to Athens on Emirates, and then I figured out how we were going to get to and from Newark. In our case, from our little tiny home airport, there's really only United that flies directly from our airport to Newark. I booked economy flights on cash, actually, from our airport to Newark. And the reason I booked cash is that I had some money in my United Travel Bank from using my Amex Platinum. This is no longer a hack that works, but you used to be able to use the $200 flight credit through Amex Platinum to just add money to a United Travel Bank and use it later. Now I'm hearing that that doesn't work the same way and that you really have to actually book things to redeem that travel credit versus just popping money in the bank. But I had done this, and so I had several $100s in my United Travel Bank, and so booked cash and then used that money to cover the fee. We did the exact same thing on the way home, where I booked a flight from Newark home on cash through United and then covered that with the travel bank as well. So the cost of those repositioning flights was effectively covered by my Amex Platinum card benefits. When you're repositioning, it's really important that you allow plenty of time. Since you're traveling on separate itineraries, you really have to make sure you don't miss that business class flight, that amazing deal that you booked. If, say, our flight was significantly delayed or canceled to Newark, we would be out of luck because Emirates doesn't care if your other flight was delayed. You didn't book that through them or a partner airline. It's essentially just missing your flight. Like if you were just to show up late to the airport, the airline's not going to do anything to help you in that case. And so when you're repositioning, you have to allow ample time so that there's plenty of wiggle room for error. What we did is we did reposition the same day because our flight was leaving at midnight. When repositioning, often people will fly the night before, stay overnight in a cheap airport hotel on points, and then fly out for their main flight the next morning. In this case, since we were leaving at midnight, we didn't want to have a whole day in Newark. We also were just trying to limit the amount of time that we were away because our kids were not with us for this trip. Did it such that if that flight had gotten entirely canceled, there was still another flight after that that would allow us still enough time to make our flights from Newark. And that's what I recommend when you're looking at the flight times to book and how long you're going to be waiting in the airport. You want it to be, I would say, a minimum of 6 hours that you're at the airport before a flight. Ideally, though, the night before, so there's even more wiggle room. You also want to make sure that there's another option. So for us, if our flight was canceled, there was another flight option that we could hop on. Our flight went as planned, and so we wound up getting to Newark quite a while before we had to be there. I think it was about 8 hours. We weren't even able to check in for our Emirates flight until 4 hours prior, so we were kind of just wandering around the airport. We did check out a lounge, which was honestly quite disappointing. When I booked this flight, I was picturing an Emirates business class lounge, which if I had looked it up, I would have known they don't have one at Newark. So I could have known that ahead of time, but I didn't really think about it until it got closer to the trip and looked into our lounge options. We have Priority Pass. I have an Amex Platinum. I knew there wasn't a Centurion lounge there through Amex, but I was thinking we'd have access to some sort of super swanky lounge. And that honestly wasn't the case, unfortunately. We used the SAS lounge, and that was what was available to us, not from Priority Pass, but because we were flying business class with Emirates. Since there's not an Emirates lounge, you're given access to that lounge. It was fine. It was basically what I would expect from a domestic Priority Pass lounge. The food was fine. It was a buffet of things like chicken wings, some soups, some sandwiches, a couple snacky things. There was a salad bar that was decent, but it was all kind of lackluster. There were drinks where you could serve yourself wine, beer, things like that. Again, options were just okay. It was all free, which is incredible. So I should not be complaining about it, but I did have in my head, we're flying business class, we're going to get to go to this super awesome lounge. And it wasn't that, unfortunately, but still great to have a nice place to sit that was quiet, where we had access to free food and drink. It really was nice to have that space. I had something in my head and it wasn't quite that. Once we got to Athens, we then did a repositioning flight from Athens to Santorini, which was also booked totally separately. For this one, we needed less wiggle room because there's tons of flights from Athens to Santorini every day. There's also ferries. And so if for some reason the Emirates flight was delayed and we had to catch a different flight or we missed our initial repositioning flight, it was not a big deal. The other thing is that these flights from Athens to Santorini are quite inexpensive. And so worst case scenario, if we missed it, not a big deal. We could book another one versus missing our business class flight to Athens would have been devastating and messed up our entire trip because it's not like I could have just booked that again if we missed it. Based on the flight times, we did have to wait a few hours in Athens just because there wasn't a flight right quick after we landed. We checked out a lounge there, and this lounge was actually better. It was the Gold Air Handling Lounge, which we accessed through Priority Pass. I have a Chase Sapphire Reserve and Amex Platinum, and my husband has Bilt, and so all three of those cards offer Priority Pass access. This was a really nice lounge. It was clean, it was big, spacious, nice natural light. There were quite a bit of food options, different sandwiches, hot food, desserts, coffees, a pretty big drink selection, and again, everything free. So this was a really nice place to relax and wait for our flight to Santorini. The two main options for getting from Athens to Santorini are flights and a ferry. Both are good options. They each have their pros and cons. We chose to fly mainly because our trip was pretty quick, and so we wanted to just get to Santorini as fast as possible. The ferries take several hours. They're as cheap as 40 to 50 euros, go up to about 100 euros, kind of depending on daytime and season. But they take between 5 and 6 hours, if I recall, with several hours. And a factor to consider is that you have to get yourself from the airport to the port where the ferry launches. So you do want to, in terms of cost and time, factor in getting from the airport to the port. And also, my understanding is that there's not really anything to do at the port. And so you want to think about where you'll be waiting, right? So if you're taking a ferry, you get yourself from the airport to the port, and then you're waiting there for however long until your boat comes, and there's not much there. Versus if you're at the airport, there's access to pretty decent Priority Pass lounges, so your wait is much more pleasant. That also factored into our decision making. One more quick note on going from Athens to Santorini. We were time limited, so we decided not to spend any time in Athens, but it would be very easy to spend some time in Athens and then go on to Santorini. There is the Grand Hyatt Athens, which is a pretty good location in Athens, and it's a category 3, so you could use a category 1 through 4 free night certificate through Hyatt. So that would be a really inexpensive way to spend a little time in Athens before going on to Santorini. There's two main flight options from Athens to Santorini and vice versa. Ryanair and Aegean Air are the two main carriers that do these flights, and there's many, many flights every single day. Ryanair is a little bit cheaper. It's more of a budget airline, but they also seem to nickel and dime you a little bit more, charging separate for bags, seat selection, things like that. Ultimately, though, for us, the decision was made just based on flight times. We wanted to have enough time to not miss the flight and also not to have a super long layover. So we wound up booking through Aegean Air. Our flights from Athens to Santorini were $102 each, including paying for our checked bags. And the flight from Santorini to Athens was $194 each, including our checked bags, also on Aegean Air. For these, I just paid cash. I didn't try to use points. One important tip is that Aegean Air and Emirates do work together in some way, because a lot of people that fly that Emirates flight to Athens are then going on to Santorini. When we checked in for our Emirates flight, they offered to check our bags all the way through, even though we were on two completely separate itineraries. Our Santorini flight wasn't at all linked to our Newark to Athens itinerary. We were glad to hear this and agreed. This would mean that we didn't have to sit security, get our checked bags, and then go back in through security with our checked bags, that it would just be checked through. Well, we wound up having plenty of time at the Athens airport. Like I said, we were there for a couple of hours. We wound up having to leave security anyway to go through customs. So we exited. We were walking by the baggage claim, and my husband said, I just have a feeling that they didn't actually check our bags all the way through. Let's just look for our bags. And so I would not have thought of this. I was thinking, oh, they checked them through. We're good. We don't have to stop here. But we did. And there came our bags. So we grabbed our bags and then checked back in and went through security again. But oh my gosh, if we had not checked, we would have gone on to Santorini expecting our bags to be there and they would have been back in Athens. So if you do this, do not trust that your bags will be checked all the way through. You can certainly say yes if they offer to do that, but I strongly recommend that you check at baggage claim and see if your bags are there. This could have been a big damper in our trip, but it wasn't. Another option is to just not check a bag. There's a huge number of people in Points and Miles and European travelers that will travel carry-on only. And we did consider this. We didn't need a lot of stuff for the trip. We could have totally done carry-on only and saved a fair amount of money in the check bag fees just for our positioning flights. But ultimately, we wanted to bring stuff home, especially wine. So because of that, we checked a bag each because we wanted to be able to bring home lots of wine and other treats. So I am glad that we checked bags in the end. Though not checking bags does get rid of some of the complications associated with travel. We had our quick flight from Athens to Santorini. It's about a 50-minute flight, super easy. Then we landed in Santorini. We rented a car. It's a nice small airport, so the rental kiosks are right there as you're exiting, super easy to find. And then there's just a parking lot where you're able to grab your cars on the way out. So that process is super easy. There's none of those big airport situations where you're shuttling to a rental car place or anything like that. It was very seamless and easy to get our car. I'll pause and talk a little bit about rental cars in Santorini. I do, in general, recommend getting a rental car if you're comfortable driving there. It is much easier to get around with a car. It kind of depends on where you're staying, I suppose. If you're staying in Fira or Ia, you might not need one. The bus system is pretty robust there, and it's very inexpensive. You can take rides for about €2, and you can get around pretty easily to all the major hubs where there's bus stops, and there's a bunch of them. Fira is the main bus station, and they have a hub and spoke system. All the bus routes start and end in Fira. If you're going, say, from north of Fira to south of Fira, you're going to get off at Fira and transfer to another bus always. It's pretty simple. The schedules make sense. The buses are on time. One of the main downsides is that the buses fill up, even during the off season. We used a bus when we did our hike from Fira to Ia to get from Ia back to Fira where our car was. And that was a great use for the bus system. And it was less than €2 to ride. But our bus filled, and when we stopped at another station to grab some more people, there was a very long line of people that were trying to get on the bus, and only about a quarter of those people were able to get on our bus. I think they come about 20 minutes, so all the people in that line would be waiting another 20 minutes for the next bus, and I'm not even sure all of them were going to fit on the next bus that came. So especially if you're traveling during high season, I would be careful about using the bus system exclusively just because it really may mean a lot of waiting and not getting on the first bus that comes. You could do bus system only if you're trying to save money. That is a reasonable strategy if you're staying somewhere near a bus station and kind of planning on doing some of the more main point things. For us, if you listened to the last episode, you know we stayed outside of Pyrgos. We were on the top of a mountain. We were, I think, 2 miles from a bus station. And although we could have walked it, it was really a very narrow, winding road up the mountain. And I don't think it would have really been a very safe walk. There's really no shoulder. There's not room for even 2 cars on the roads. They're very narrow. And so adding ourselves into that mix would have been dicey. We also had thought about renting bikes, which after we had been there, I would strongly not recommend as a way to get around. Again, roads are super narrow. It's very hilly, and there's really no shoulder. The roads are kind of crumbling at the edges, and so it would just be extremely difficult to ride a bike there. And I'm a decently experienced cyclist, would not recommend. Something else to consider in terms of getting a car versus trying to use the bus system and taxis is the places that you want to go. If you're planning on mainly going to places like Fira and Ia, you could totally use the bus system, no problem. We wanted to do some more off the beaten path type stuff. You really need a car to do that, or it's going to be much more expensive to get cabs to those areas. So because we were doing some hiking, a couple different areas, and we wanted to go to ancient Thera and Akrotiri, a car just really made sense for us. So if you're doing some more off the beaten path stuff, again, strongly recommend a car. Our car was so inexpensive partially because we got this teeny tiny little thing, and it basically just fit the two of us in the front. And then with folding the back seat down, we were able to put our suitcases in the trunk. And that was even a tight squeeze. So picking a nice small car, if there's only one or two of you, is a great way to save some cash. Some people get around on ATVs in Santorini, and I don't know. It depends who you ask. I thought this looked unnecessarily dangerous. I probably would have done this in my early 20s, but now it just does not seem appealing to me to be on an ATV on a road. One of the main concerns is that the ATV tires are just not really made to be on a road surface, and so there's some slipping that can happen. And there's accidents on ATVs by tourists every year. There's not really off-road stuff to do in Santorini. So it's not like there's places to take the ATV and go where only an ATV can go. It's really you're driving on the roads. And so my thought is, if you're going to be on a road, why not just be in a car or on a bus that's meant to be on the road? But that's just my opinion. The other factor is price. So the ATV rentals really aren't cheaper than car rentals. So again, not sure why you would pick an ATV over a car. A car is safer, more convenient. You can keep your stuff in it and lock it. So for us, car was the way to go. We booked through Hertz. I have Hertz status through my Amex Platinum, and many of the ultra premium travel cards will give you status with various car rental places. You just have to activate it. I booked paying with my Chase Sapphire Reserve for the primary car insurance coverage. This is an awesome feature of the Sapphire cards, both the Reserve and the Preferred. You, when using that card, want to decline all insurance coverage offered through the rental company, because using the card to pay for the reservation, you have primary insurance coverage through the credit card. Meaning, if you're in an accident and you have a claim, that is all run through the car insurance through the credit card company. You would get reimbursed through the credit card company. And that happens without first going through your own personal car insurance. That's how it differs from secondary coverage. The car insurance coverage is really good. There are some exclusions. So there's certain few countries you can't use this. So definitely check and make sure that the country you're going to is a place that you can use that coverage through the Sapphire card. But as long as you can, you decline all of the coverage offered through the car insurance company, and that saves a ton of money. I booked the car through Capital One Shopping to earn $50 cash back. This was another great example of when you're Googling around and doing shopping. Capital One Shopping, if you have the extension, is watching what you're doing, and then you'll get targeted offers. So I was just activating my Hertz status and looking at car prices. And then I X'd that window out, logged into Capital One Shopping, and boom, there it was. Earn $50 cash back on $50 or more when booking through Hertz. If these offers pop up, these targeted offers, use them right away. Sometimes if you close out Capital One Shopping and there's an awesome offer there, if you come back in, it might not be there. So I jumped right on it, booked it. It was only $131 for the car for 5 days, and I then had the $50 cash back, so effectively it was $81. And this was cheaper than it was going to be to book transportation from the airport to our hotel and back. We had previously arranged that through our hotel. We were going to have a car pick us up at the airport, take us to the hotel, and vice versa. And it was higher. I think it was 90 euros total to do just that. Plus, we would have had to have rides arranged, and it would have been way more expensive to not rent a car. So renting a car, again, was definitely the way to go for this trip. Parking can be an issue during the high season. So if you're traveling in summer, if you're going to hot spots like Fira and Ia, the parking does fill up very fast. We had absolutely no issue with parking because we were traveling at the end of April into early May. The driving is not something I would be comfortable with. My husband is the driver, just in general, and especially on vacation. I'm a total passenger princess. He likes to drive, so this works out great. The cars are mostly manual, but you can get automatic. It's just there's not as many available. He drives manual, so not a big deal, but the roads, again, are super narrow. They're really only wide enough for one car. And when you're driving up a mountain and there's a car coming right at you, and it's tough. We learned once we did a tour that the rule there is that if you're going uphill, you have the right of way. So the people coming downhill are supposed to kind of pull over and wait for you so that you're not stopping, going up a mountain, and then having to restart with the manual transmission. Once we learned that, it was a little bit easier, but he thought it was super fun. But if you're a nervous driver, this would be a little bit tricky to do. Going back to the flying from Athens to Santorini to ferry from Athens to Santorini debate, another thing to factor in. I'm pretty positive there's not any car rentals at the port. When you get to the port, you are essentially at the bottom of a cliff edge, and then there's these really intense stairs that go up, and you're either needing to arrange a car to pick you up there, or you're walking up these pretty intense stairs with your bags. So that's definitely something to keep in mind if you're taking the ferry, is that there's not car rental just right there, and you're probably having to arrange a ride to pick you up there. With flying, of course, again, the rental car kiosks are right there, and it's super easy to get your car. Quick reminder that, like so many other places, the car rental companies here, in our experience, they did try to say that there was new damage to the car, which there wasn't. So just remember, when you're renting a car, I mean, really anywhere, but especially abroad, to take some pictures of every side of the car, especially high impact areas like the bumper, and take a video of yourself walking around it so that if they do try to claim there's any new damage, that you're able to prove that there's not. When we dropped off our car, the person that took it in the parking lot, pointed to some ding on the bumper and said, "This is new," which was interesting because how would he know that? He is not the person we got the car from initially. They rent so many cars. I mean, without looking at the file to see what scratches and dents were documented, I'm not sure how he thought he knew that it was new. He probably didn't. He was probably just trying to get some money from us. So he told us to go in to the kiosk inside, and we did. And our photos, actually, I took the photos, and the teeny tiny part of the bumper that I didn't include in the photo was the part that he said was dented. So we actually, unfortunately, didn't have proof that there wasn't a new dent. So when you're taking these photos and videos, be very careful that you're including every single little surface on your walk around with the video. But fortunately, when we got to the kiosk, we said, "Hey, we were told to come up here because there was supposedly a new dent on the bumper that isn't new." He looked up our case really quickly and said, "Oh, you're good, go." And we said, okay. So we took no further questions, just kind of ran away, and very glad that we didn't have to deal with an insurance claim. It would have been paid through that primary coverage with the Chase Sapphire Reserve, but I, of course, did not want to deal with any of that. I was very happy not to. Flights home. So I had really high hopes for upgrading our economy flights on Emirates from Athens to Newark to business class, especially after we took the business class flight, and it was incredible. I was fairly hopeful that we would be able to upgrade to business class on the way home. When I booked this trip initially, I didn't have enough points to book us outright on business class back. I prioritized business class on the way there because I knew we'd want to get some good sleep and then be able to hit the ground running once we got to Athens. And that was definitely the way to go. If you're only booking business class one way, I would say book it on the way there, get some good rest, and then enjoy your trip. Economy on the way home is a bummer, but hey, it's fine. I don't hear this talked about enough in Points and Miles, but it's very inexpensive to get from Athens to Newark in economy on Emirates. This is a great option for economy flights. It was 17,500 points plus $172 in taxes and fees for each of us, which is a great deal. I mean, we paid less than $200 a person to get home. Incredible, and not that many points. The value of these flights was $1,383 in total for the two of us, so overall value of 3 cents per point. Awesome value, great way to get to or from Athens. As I was mentioning before, Japan Airlines, Air Canada, and Qantas are some other ways to book flights through Emirates, and this also includes, of course, the economy flights as well. Other ways to get to Athens, you can get from JFK to Athens with about 27,000 Alaska miles and only $18 on American Airlines booked through Alaska Miles. So that's a way to get the taxes and fees really low, but it's higher in points, of course, than the Emirates flights. And then I also saw economy flights on United for about 40,000 points headed over to Athens. Also keep in mind that for this or any other trip to Europe, that you don't have to fly right to the country you're trying to go to because it's so easy to get around Europe. Since for Santorini specifically, you have to take another flight to get there anyway, there's lots of other places that fly direct to Santorini. So you wouldn't necessarily have to fly to Athens and then Santorini. You could fly to one of the other airlines that flies then direct to Santorini. So there's many options here, but London Heathrow, Frankfurt, Amsterdam, and Paris are all great places that you could get points deals and then fly from that city to Santorini on Aegean Air or Ryanair for a relatively cheap cash rate. Quick tips for booking these. Getting to London, Virgin Atlantic is an amazing way to book from Boston to London Heathrow, as low as 40,000 points for business class. There's also often transfer bonuses to Virgin Atlantic, but the taxes and fees with Virgin Atlantic tend to be a little higher. Booking to Frankfurt, you can book Condor, either economy or business class at pretty decent low rates through JetBlue. This is actually how we're getting home from Germany later this summer. You could also find great deals to Amsterdam and Paris through Flying Blue. They often have promo rates, so you could take advantage of one of those. Flying Blue directly, there is a discount of 25% off the points price for children. So that's a really good one to consider if you're traveling with a family. You can also book these Flying Blue flights, Air France and KLM flights, through Virgin Atlantic. So that's a different way to get those same flights booked, but then you are paying those higher taxes and fees associated with Virgin Atlantic. Long story short, don't just limit yourself to thinking about flying into Athens if you're going to Santorini. There's lots of other hubs you could fly into, lots of ways you could get there for a low points price. Back to our flight home, we really wanted to fly business class both ways, but when I booked it, didn't have enough points. I booked us on the flight Athens to Newark for 17,500 points and $172 in taxes and fees, with the hope that I'd be able to upgrade us to business class with points at check-in. I've seen several posts on people upgrading to business class from economy on points with Emirates. And from all of my reading and listening, I had figured out that it seemed like it was about 39,000 to 50,000 points to upgrade an existing economy flight to business class. So I, in the meantime, while we were waiting for the trip, saved up a bunch of Bilt points. My husband got the Bilt Palladium card. We got that sign-in bonus and did some spending on that card. So I had more than enough points to upgrade both of us if it was up to 50,000 points per flight. So we were ready to do that. We were just hopeful that there was actually space. So we made sure we were right at the check-in 4 hours before the flight time, which is when they opened up the lines for check-in. We got through the line. There were business class flights available. So I was very excited about that. And then the guy at the window did some typing and looking and let me know that it was going to be 80,000 points each to upgrade. So 160,000 points total, which I did not have. I had 100,000 points in my Bilt account. And thankfully, I did not transfer points to Emirates before this. I had the Bilt app pulled up. I was ready to hit transfer once I knew how many points we needed and that there was availability. He told us it would be 80,000 points each. I did not have that many points. I did do a quick search before walking up to the counter to see if we had to buy a few points, how much that would cost. And so we had looked up the cost of buying, a couple thousand points if needed, and that was not bad and totally worth it. But to purchase that many points, it was going to be several $1,000s. So I said, no, thank you. We will not upgrade. We had thought about, my husband had offered, if there's only one seat available, you should just upgrade yourself. And I was not sure what I was going to do if that was the case. I wanted to sit with him, obviously, but I was also really dying to experience business class again. So I don't know. If it was like 39,000 points to upgrade and there was only one seat, I probably would have done that on my own. But paying $80K just for me, not worth it. And we also knew that the flight was not full, and we had a row of 3 economy seats with an open seat in the middle. Knowing that and knowing that it was going to be such a high points price, I definitely wasn't going to spend the cash to get the additional Bilt points to do the upgrade. And I really didn't even want to spend the $80K just to upgrade me. And I'm glad I didn't. We had a fine economy flight home. It was economy. It was fine. It was reasonably comfortable. Decent amount of leg room. Having that seat in the middle made it much more pleasant. But the cabin is overall pretty spacious. The service is pretty good. We had 2 meals served on the flight. Drinks. The service was so-so. My husband had recently flown economy on KLM to and from Porto. And he felt the service and economy on Emirates was really lacking compared to his experience in economy on KLM. He said on that flight they were bringing snacks and drinks by all the time. And on this flight, really, they did kind of just give us the 2 meals, 1 drink round through, and that was kind of it, unless you asked for something. And he said they were way more attentive on the KLM flight. I thought it was fine. I didn't expect a good amount of service on that flight, but it was a pretty big difference in service. But I mean, it was fine and a very inexpensive way to get to and from Europe. For repositioning home from Newark, unfortunately, there were no flights that left Newark and went to our home airport late enough for us to get home that same night. We landed, I think, around 9:30 p.m. New York time, and there wasn't a flight that we could get home at that point. So we had booked our United flights back home for the next morning, and we stayed overnight in a Marriott right by the airport, and I had some points that I was able to use. I didn't transfer points. These were just Marriott points I had sitting in my account. Be very careful if you are booking a Marriott or really any other airport hotel around Newark. There's a bunch, and it's, I don't know, the whole shuttle thing. It was just very confusing which Marriott we were staying at, which shuttle was going where. We were also very tired. Like at this point, we had been up for an extremely long time because we were trying to not have jet lag. Just be careful. There's a Marriott that you can see right from the terminal, and there's an easy shuttle to that one. But the one we booked, I had thought was that one because it looked on the map like it was right adjacent to the airport, but it was actually a completely different one, and our shuttle took a little bit longer. So just caution if you're booking an airport hotel in Newark. I do think this was worse because there's some construction going on, so the tram wasn't going everywhere and the shuttle system was a little off, but just don't make that mistake that we made. Be careful. So that was our trip in terms of logistics and travel. I will just throw in a few little tips that came up through our trip. Shoulder season. I mentioned this a couple times briefly, but Santorini is so incredibly busy in the summer, and transportation to the island, around the island, all of that is just going to be so different if you go in late April, early May versus the summer. And I'm sure the same is for fall. It's probably also great there. They get 300 days of sunshine a year. The weather is very mild. It was high 50s, low 60s, and sunny the entire time we were there. And it's like that through the shoulder season. So, and it's unpleasantly hot in the summer is what I hear. So strongly recommend shoulder season, honestly, for everywhere, but Santorini especially. Other things are remembering to use your credits through your credit cards to make travel just more enjoyable and cheaper. One of the things that we did is we signed up for Clear using my Amex Platinum credit while we were waiting at Newark to get on our flight to Athens. It was too early to check in, so we were just kind of stuck walking around. So I signed up for Clear, which I had a credit to fully cover the cost for with my Amex Platinum. The person that checked us in actually gave my husband a free 2-week trial that he can then use. So we were able to use Clear on the way back. And he actually gave me a discount so that I didn't use the full cost of my Clear credit. It was minus $50. And so he explained, if you want to cancel his trial, just cancel it. But if you don't and you pay his with your Amex Platinum, his would then be $50 off. We only have the one card that has the Clear credit. So we actually did wind up doing this. We used his free trial to come home and decided to then pay for his for the year with the $50 off because kids can use the Clear line if they're with an adult that has a Clear membership. We don't yet have TSA PreCheck or Nexus, and we're going to Paris and Germany with our kids in just a month or so. So we decided it would be nice to have that clear membership while we're waiting to get our Nexus that includes TSA pre-check. So checking off that clear credit is something you can do if you're waiting in an airport. Also, Dunkin' credits. My husband has an Amex Gold, so every month I've got a reminder on my phone. I add $7 paying with his Amex Platinum to my Dunkin' mobile card, and then I don't love Dunkin', so I don't usually go there, but whenever we're traveling, we've always got Dunkin' money on the card from loading the $7 at a time, and so I always use Dunkin' when we're in the airports. Also, of course, remembering to take advantage of your lounge access. I also used a half off All Trails premium membership with an Amex Platinum offer, and then enjoyed use of All Trails while we were on the trip. So just remembering again, if you're going to purchase, any kind of online purchase, check first to see, one, if you can earn more points by going through a shopping portal, and two, if your cards have any credits that you can use. And I love card pointers for this. You can input all of your cards. It can auto add the offers to your cards, and you can search. So before I purchased All Trails, which I wanted to do anyway, I just did a quick search for All Trails in my app, and it showed up, you've got 50% off on your Amex Platinum. So I saved 50% that way. All in all, Santorini was incredible. Business class on Emirates, totally worth the hype in my opinion, even with the higher taxes and fees and less favorable transfer ratios at this point. If you're loving the podcast, please give me a rating, 5 stars if you think it's deserved, and leave me a review. That really helps my podcast grow. Thank you so much for listening. This has been Points Everywhere. Thanks for joining me on Points Everywhere. For more points and miles secrets, follow me on Instagram at Points Everywhere. For referral links to my favorite cards, check out pointseverywhere.com. If you're enjoying this podcast, I would love it if you could take a minute to leave me some stars and a review. See you next time.